All right, I am Mitch Maley, and welcome to another edition of Punk Rock Politics, the podcast. I am joined by Brendan Ragan and Elsie Gilmore, and we are going to talk inauguration first. So the day is done. We have a new president. Q was wrong, but we'll get back to that. But first, I want to kick it to you guys and see your reaction to the inauguration itself. A little bit different, but still a lot of energy. Go ahead, Elsie.
It was definitely different. It's so weird to think we're going to look back in history and have these moments, these photos, these videos where everyone's wearing masks, and someday someone might not understand that. So that was a little surreal. But it was really emotional for me watching Kamala get sworn in as the first woman who's ever been vice president. It was really just amazing. I see you got Chucks on there. So that was amazing. Lady Gaga, that was cool. I think they kept it kind of short. It seemed really short to me, but they did like the color guard, and everyone, was social distanced. There weren't
Thank God for that.
There weren't a lot of spectators.
I was so worried. I was like, don't screw this up.
No, they did good. They know what's going on. So there weren't a lot of spectators, which is different. But they filled the mall with flags, which was very eye-catching.
Before 5 o'clock yesterday, I got an email if I wanted to pre-order the new Bernie inauguration bobblehead.
Okay, I have right now, I'm living for the Bernie Sanders mittens memes. Okay,
are killing it right now.
The mittens memes, and I'm from Vermont, so that is like peak Vermont. Okay, that's like peak weird, wonderful Vermont, and I am loving it.
And did anybody hear the story of the mittens?
Yes, I posted it on my Facebook page.
Run it down for those who haven't heard.
They were given to him 2 years ago by this woman in Burlington, Vermont, who makes them, and they're made out of recycled materials.
Yes, including a lining that's somehow made out of recycled water bottles, plastic water bottles.
Yes, actually, some fleece is made out of recycled.
That's what it was.
Water
Yeah,
bottles.
it was a fleece lining.
Yes,
they looked warm.
They did.
It was just so Bernie, though. It was such a wonderful moment.
I
It was
love
like,
him so
I'm going to
much.
stop in here real quick, then I'm going to get my groceries.
Yeah.
Come on, where are we at it?
I thought the speech too was also pretty significant that Biden gave, because often at inaugurations we get a little sample of a president's agenda from a policy standpoint, especially if there's a big hallmark policy or if there's a big goal that a president wants to push forward. And Biden was pretty light on policy for his inaugural address.
Oh, keeping in spot with his whole campaign.
Just right down the middle from his campaign. And listen, I thought he spoke about policy when asked during the campaign really well. He knew what his positions were, but that was not what he was running on. He was not running on policy. He was running on healing and running on I'm not Trump,
yeah.
and I can beat Trump.
Right.
And I think we all sort of agreed this is the guy who can beat him.
I did not, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go ahead and pass on that.
Well, he beat him.
Yes.
This is true.
So he was kind of right.
I don't know. Like, I'll go back the last time. I thought Hillary was the only one that could lose to Trump. I said that in print. So I think really I think what you had there was, you had Obama come in at the end and sort of anoint him by brokering the deal to drop out with Buttigieg and Klobuchar right before Super Tuesday. And it was how do we who can best consolidate the Democratic establishment vote and make sure that Bernie Sanders doesn't become the nominee.
All right, and can I just...
So I think they said Biden's the guy that could beat Bernie Sanders, but I think Bernie Sanders had an even better chance of beating Trump.
And I'm just going to go on record as saying that I feel with 100% certainty that if Bernie Sanders had won the nomination in 2016, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now.
Yes.
That's just me.
I would agree with that.
I think you're right because of the Bernie Trump voters.
Yes.
That we talked about that last episode.
Yes.
That very strange demographic that's not extremely political, but was fed up with politics, and that there is an actual group of particularly blue collar workers who felt very strongly about Bernie. And then when he got beat sort of unceremoniously by the Democratic National Convention, they switched over to Trump, and it blew a lot of people away. But they would have hung with Bernie.
You know, there's a great, just last night, my son and I were watching on Netflix, Robert Reich, the former Secretary of Labor
I love
under
him.
Clinton.
I love him.
He has a new documentary called Saving Capitalism.
Really?
Yes, it's excellent. And they're actually one of the families that they show. It's I think he's mostly in Kansas City through the whole thing. And one of the families that they kind of profile is a farmer, and his son, you know, left the farm as in some other blue collar work. And his son falls in that category. And it was interesting because they filmed it during the 2016 election, and his son explains why he was for Bernie and ended up for Trump. And you kind of get this like really kind of insight.
I mean,
to
it makes
which was
sense. It makes perfect sense, though. I mean, they were both sort of outsiders, even though Bernie's been in Washington for a long time. You know, he was always an independent, and you know, even though he caucused with the Democrats, he represented change.
Yes.
But returning to the point, Biden did pull off exactly what he said he was going to pull off. He didn't say, I'm going to run on life-beating policy, world-changing ideas. He was running on, I am the guy who can bring just enough of a coalition together, including just enough Republicans, the suburban vote that we talked about last time, to drag the party over the finish line and get rid of Trump. And he did just enough.
He did, but you can't discount the fact that he had the entirety of the establishment legacy media behind him. So, and that's the part that people kind of glaze over. But the truth is,
but that was part of why so many voters reluctantly agreed that he was the guy.
I think so.
Put them together.
Yeah, but I think most of those voters that you're talking about, I think most of them were influenced by that media push. So I think had you not had that, so when for case in point, there's a great article by the historian Thomas Franks, who writes a column in Harper's Magazine, and he did this great piece in 2016 where he went and cataloged how horrible, particularly the Washington Post coverage of Bernie was. And I actually had an opportunity at SLR to interview Bernie's campaign manager when he came back through town. And the question I asked him, I said, you know what's so fascinating to me was when Bernie won the Iowa and then when he won New Hampshire, nobody was saying what I would expect, which was, oh my God, can you believe it? Look at this grassroots underdog. Nobody's ever gone this far, not got the nomination. Instead, the entirety of the establishment media was explaining every day how, oh, that doesn't really matter, and here's why he won't win, and it doesn't even matter then because then he definitely wouldn't win for president. So if you keep saying that over and over and over, the voters will move in that direction. And I really believe the voters bought the line of, oh, only Biden can beat Trump, because they kept hearing only Biden can beat Trump over and over and over. And the policies prove it. Like Elsie brought up last week, the way that the Fight for 15 passed with such a majority here in Florida, even though Trump won by better than expected. So it shows that the popularity of those policies are there, but then people are being taught like, oh, but the guy who like runs on those can't win. And it doesn't make sense, but if they say it enough, it happens.
It's called messaging and marketing.
Yes.
And
So
it
to your
works.
point, that's 100% true.
But he got the messaging. That's my point.
Yes.
Enough people decided,
And enough media
and then
coverage,
enough
yes.
people bought it.
Yeah.
So he got the
Yes.
unfair,
Right.
but the message was he could build just enough of a coalition, and he did. And then it should not be all that surprising that his inaugural address was really kind of this. It was almost like a pastor saying we need to heal and we need to unify and we need to listen to each other and we need to open our souls and not harden our hearts. I thought that was a great line, but how's he going to do it? I mean, that's the question that immediately
He absolutely
comes up.
reached out to the other side, which I think was very important. I've been monitoring my feeds to see what the other side is saying today, and I did see that apparently Lady Gaga was wearing the Chinese national flower in her hair as a symbol of.
Oh,
So there was no.
Who gave you that? The Q people? Was that the
I was
Q
just
people?
gonna say-
No, it wasn't even a Q. That was mainstream Republicans at that point.
What?
Yes, yes. So that nobody grabbed that I can see grabbed that olive branch to the extended, but it was Fox news anchor Chris Wallace called it the best. Not a liberal guy, but called it the best inaugural speech since John F. Kennedy. So
It was
Wow.
it was a moving speech. It didn't seem like a politically charged
no,
speech.
definitely not.
No.
And maybe that's why it felt so good.
I think it was
because
definitely the right tone
it was
for the moment.
it was the right temperature, that's for sure. And he really, for all his flaws as a politician, he does lead with his heart quite a bit. And I think that's what he did for the speech. They did a really nice job building him a speech that showed his empathy, because that's what people want right now.
And you know what's interesting is I was just listening to some newscaster. I think they were talking to Sousa, the photographer.
Pete D'Souza.
yeah,
Yeah, Pete
Pete
Souza.
D'Souza.
Yeah.
Saying that he saw Obama and Biden as like the head and the heart. So I think maybe it's probably opposite now, and that Biden is the heart and Kamala is the head.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's probably a more logically driven person just because of the jobs that she's had. So I think they will have a good dynamic also.
I agree. I think that'll be important on how, because again, if you remember, she was pushed by the donor class. So she was definitely the donor class's choice to be the vice president, as more so than him selecting her. But so far, it seems like they're going to have a really good working relationship. Mm-hmm. And I would hazard to guess that the plan is for her to run and Joe to step down at the end of one term, given his age.
It'll be fascinating to see when they finally reveal that, because immediately it'll feel like Joe, especially with such a closely divided Congress, will become a lame duck.
Yes, that's a good point.
And you don't want him to become a lame duck like in year 2. If it says if he says, yeah, I'm a bridge candidate, and that means one term, then immediately what are we going to do towards the end of this term?
I don't think there's any profit.
Especially if the Democrats lose the House, which they likely will.
Yes. And I don't think there's any profit at all in announcing that early. I think I would keep that very, very tight to my chest.
I actually think that one of his advisors was saying, he's fully intending on running in 2024.
Yeah, that's the smart
And
move.
how old will he be then?
82 years.
106. All right. So pardons. So the big question was, will we see any last minute pardons that are very, very surprising? We did not.
I don't know. I think Bannon was pretty surprising.
Yeah, I guess surprising from a strategic standpoint.
Okay, yeah.
I feel so bad for these Trump supporters. I mean,
Right.
number one, he didn't pardon anyone, even the woman with the private jet. He didn't pardon her. I thought maybe
Who begged for a pardon on the news.
Maybe she could pay him off. But Bannon, and I didn't realize there was a guy from Sarasota that was involved in that
Yes.
building the wall
Yep,
scheme.
yep. Yeah.
So that's nice. But it's like,
So for those of you guys that weren't keeping up, Steve Bannon was facing federal charges of fraud because of this charity they'd set up to take donations to help build the wall that did no such thing.
Didn't do anything,
So
and then he just took $1 million off
Yeah.
of the top and said they were part of his expenses. So
As
he went
one
straight to
does
jail.
in that
Yeah.
position.
let's think about the people that donated to that charity, okay? These are people who were manipulated into clearly hating immigrants so much that even though they also hated taxes, they would take money out of their own pockets to pay for a wall that...
But not just pay for a wall, pay for a GoFundMe for a wall.
Yes.
Okay, so it gets worse. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah.
I feel bad for the type of person who could be manipulated like that.
And they won't get their justice now.
No, they will not get their justice now because he is being pardoned.
I actually read that was why the pardons came out so late, was because all of Trump's advisors were saying, do not pardon Bannon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
and,
that was a really last minute decision.
and he was going back and forth, and it was Bannon really coming out strongly in defense of Trump with the big lie about the election being stolen, that Trump kind of felt comfortable doing it, and that's what put him over the top.
Well, no, I think what sealed the deal is, if you noticed, he gave a bunch of glowing quotes about Ivanka Trump.
Bannon did?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
In the week leading up to that.
That's weird.
Well, she has major political
Senator Ivanka
aspirations.
Trump?
There's rumors
dear
she's going to be
God.
running against Rubio in the next primary.
Will you stop it?
Oh.
Is she a Florida resident?
Yes, it just
Oh.
paid $33 million for a little plot of land and no house on it,
I
just
did
the
not
land in
know
South
that.
Florida. What do they call it? A billionaire bunker down there.
She's got a
Oh,
mailing
boy.
address.
Yeah. She might wait 7. I think you have to be 7 years a resident to run for governor, but you don't for Senate. So
Do you think her and Jared are going to go back to being, Democrats now?
great
No.
question. I think not.
No.
Maybe she could run against Rubio as a Democrat. That would be great.
What Bannon did for her was he went on the right wing circuit and said that we got away from the populism, but there was nobody in that inner circle more populist than Ivanka was. So he
yes,
he simped for her a
she's-
little
That's
bit.
the
She's
first word
so,
that comes
like-
to mind.
Yeah,
Right?
the
Person-
common
she's
man.
a woman of the people.
Clearly, that is the truth.
Did anybody hear the story this week about their Secret Service?
Yeah, they'll get 6 extra months of Secret
No.
Service.
About Jared and Ivanka's Washington
Oh,
Secret Service.
yes, the bathroom. The bathroom.
Yeah, the
They
outhouse.
apparently rented a basement apartment across the street for the Secret Service detail to use the bathroom because they weren't allowed to use any
They
of the
had
indoor
6.5 bathrooms.
Yeah.
6.5
Yes.
bathrooms and wouldn't let the Secret
Not
Service
even the
use
half.
any of them.
Not even the half. They weren't asked in the shower.
But wait, the best part is that apparently the Obamas have a house near there, and
Yes,
they were
they were
asking
borrowing-
the Obamas
yes,
to
yes.
use their bathroom.
And they were temporarily letting them until
Yes.
some terrible
Some
Secret Service
neighbor.
toilet incident. And then they said, okay, no more.
I think it was one of Obama's Secret Service agents who clogged it and then blamed it. Oh man, we had
Those are new
Ivanka's guys. They only feed them. You see what Trump eats. They send Kentucky Fried Chicken to the place.
No, but speaking of Secret Service, this little known thing, Trump in his final hours, he actually declared that not only will he and Melania get lifetime Secret Service, but like 13 members of his family are going to get an extra 6 months of security details.
just from the inauguration for 6 months.
Yeah, from 6 months on, which is unusual. They usually wouldn't get that unless they were, younger, like maybe going to college or something. But they're all adults at this point, and it's just going to be like tens of millions of dollars in security detail for no reason, just because it's like a nice little perk.
I
he
wonder if
gave
the
out.
It's
niece
because-
who wrote the tell-all is going to get it.
Come on.
I'm guessing not.
It's because they think,
I don't think Mary's going to get one.
it's because they think they're so important that
Yeah.
people, want to harm them.
Will Tiffany get one? Will she get a little?
She's got, yeah.
Oh.
she's got
Even
detail.
Tiffany?
I'm not-
Tiffany's got
All right,
one.
I got to give it up for Tiffany on that.
Hey, even Eric is going to get one.
I'm Eric.
I love the SNL
Yes.
portrayals of Eric. It is so
Hi,
hilarious.
I'm Eric. All right. So, what we got to remind people too, because a lot of this happened over the Christmas and New Year's break, but the most egregious pardons happened already. We had the Blackwater war criminals
Yeah,
pardon.
Oh,
that
God,
one's still,
yeah.
that one by far is the worst. I
And
think.
another thing to remember on that is Betsy DeVos waited around. Her brother is Eric Prince, who is the
Yes.
CEO of Blackwater, which rebranded as Academy now because that name is so tarnished. But it was good enough to get them off. We had Roger Stone already, Paul Manafort, Charles Kushner, Jarrett's felon father.
Oh, I did not see that
dad,
one.
yeah.
He got one in there
Good
too.
for him.
Yeah, that's what you saw yesterday too. Even on the lesser known names, obviously there was the rappers. That I think that was for street cred when he goes to prison, but can't blame him on that
Hey,
one.
Lil Wayne earned his. He was
Yes, he was out there.
he was out there with the hat on, man.
Yeah.
He definitely knew what he had to do to get that.
But where his real soft
Wait, is that
spot?
why Dr. Dre supported him?
No, he didn't get one.
He might have wanted one of them preemptive ones people were talking about.
Right.
But there was a big surprise in that there was none of the ones that people were hoping for. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Pamela Anderson lobbied him for Julian Assange.
Oh.
I hadn't heard of this at all, but apparently Pamela Anderson
Yes,
might be in an affair with Julian Assange.
Okay,
she
I didn't-
visits him regularly.
I did know that.
And
I did know that.
The tabloids over there suggest that they might be romantically linked, and she has
Wow.
not denied it.
Wow. That's
What is this? Page 6?
Right? So we're looking at the possibility. You had a lot of people saying, would Trump kind of stick a thumb in the eye of the so-called deep state, the Republican wing, the Bush wing, the neocon wing, and the Democrats by pardoning Assange, maybe even Edward Snowden, maybe even Reality Winner, somebody or all of them. And that probably would have had some populist appeal because there are a lot of people, myself included, that think they should all be pardoned. But you had rumors that Mitch McConnell sent word, and again, this has not been confirmed, but you have back channel rumors that Mitch McConnell sent word that if you pardon Assange, the Senate will vote to convict.
Wow.
And if you do not, they won't. So it'll be interesting, especially if you don't get enough Republicans voting to convict. It'll be interesting if that lends credence to that possibility.
well. Here's the thing: is Trump doesn't even know what the deep state is. You know what I mean? When he
It's
says
whatever he doesn't like.
exactly when he says deep state, it's like word salad. It doesn't mean anything. But I don't know if you heard this. Apparently, there is a rumor that Rudy Giuliani offered to pardon Julian Assange for $2 million.
$2 million. That was a rumor. That was supposedly Giuliani's going price for a lot of people. There was rumors for a few people that it was $2 million. But then,
so if you paid Giuliani $2 million, he said he could convince Trump
Yes.
to get you a pardon. Which, by the way, he probably couldn't.
which he hasn't even convinced
he can't
Trump to
even
get paid. He was supposed to be getting $20,000 a day during the whole
The Four Seasons
yes.
Total Landscaping. He marched out there and did that press conference for absolutely free.
And
Hey,
it's pro bono apparently.
That con artist conned me. I'm so surprised.
I'm shocked.
Sleep with dogs, you wake up with fleas. But you look at this, and here you have, this is more proof, and one of the other subjects we were talking about briefly before we went on air is you have this idea that now you had Brennan, former CIA director, making the talk show rounds, and a few other in the intel community talking about increasing the tools to go after these right-wing neo-Nazi, sedationists who attack the Capitol. And it sounds a lot like Patriot Act 9/11 Part 2 here.
Man, I hate this. I hate using an awful thing to justify another awful thing. I think they have the tools at their disposal to catch these people. I mean, half these idiots put themselves on Facebook Live as they stormed the Capitol. There have been 120 federal arrests, and that doesn't even have anything to do yet with the local, regional arrests that have happened. And, they're already saying they'll probably will haul in several hundred people from this. And if you're already feeling like you have that, then you have the technology to stop this. It was online. Everyone knew. Everyone on Twitter knew. Everyone on 4chan knew this was coming. But I just think that they didn't take the threat seriously. And I don't think that you can then retroactively say, okay, well, it must have been a lack of intelligence and therefore we should be able to spy on people. I don't think that's what we need right now.
Yeah, and that's something that, listen, Democrats, especially these, ones that are all starry-eyed and hopeful about these next 4 years, they need to make sure they don't fall back into this trap that happened in 2009. And what I mean by that is we didn't like when George Bush was blowing up women and children with drones, but when Obama was ordering even more drone strikes,
we
it was
looked
like,
away.
well, those drone strikes are a little different. Same thing with immigration, same thing with detentions and so forth. Democrats have a lot to
Okay, but
lot
I
of
have
work
something
do
to
there.
say about
Go
that.
ahead.
The reason people didn't complain when Democrats did it is because Republicans don't really care about those things. They only care about them when it is in their self-interest.
But Democrats didn't complain about it. That's my point, is that you had Democrats that were so up in arms about the war in Iraq and Afghanistan until there was a Democratic president. It's just, it's the same exact thing as when we say Republicans only care about deficits when there's a Democrat in office, and then when they start running them up, then it's no problem. But Democrats are the same way.
And that's why I'm saying the unified Democratic government right now can't take the bait and say, hey, white nationalists, we got to get rid of those. So we need a little spying to happen. Like, we should not fall down that.
But the problem is what you apply to them will eventually get applied to you.
Yes, without question.
That's the problem.
Exactly.
And these institutions, history has shown us, they are not, of the mindset where they want to give up power. They're always trying to maintain their relevance, maintain the leverage that they have within the halls of power. And whenever they have an opportunity, especially post Cold War, to get more funding, to get more leverage, to get more people higher up on the Rolodex, it's a frightening thing. And when you look and you see what's happened have we given back any of the special powers from the Patriot Act?
Well, I was just going to say, we
Yeah.
haven't even got rid of the Patriot Act yet. So we definitely don't want to add to it.
Right. We haven't rolled anything back. So we're still doing the same things at airports. The lesson is nothing ever tends to scale back when it comes to the police state. Look at Obama did put a commission on to look at, policing and tied in with funding, but the militarization of the police, that was bipartisan and came from Washington because the military industrial complex said, hey, we, as these wars wind down a little bit, we really don't want our, stock dividends to go with them. So how could we sell more war equipment? I got it. Let's call it anti-terrorism and sell them to you, and then you give them the police forces.
Yeah.
That can't go wrong, can it?
Yeah, let's build up our inner city weapons of
Sheriff's
mass
Department,
destruction.
They need tanks too.
Yeah, they need Humvees.
Right?
And that's been going on for a long time. I remember when that first started, and I'm like, that's a really bad idea. Who thought that was a good idea?
Well, a lot of Democrats and Republicans.
A lot of white people, I bet.
There you go. All right, so we're against expanding the police state. Let's go over into a kind of sad subject at this point. I mean this. I'm not being facetious. The Q phenomenon, QAnon. I was getting messages right up until Inauguration Day, and they kept adjusting as to, wait, this is what's going to happen next. And as each one failed to happen, I got the ones before the insurrection about, Mike Pence is going to walk in and he's not going to certify it and all those things. That didn't happen. And it was, whoa, wait, here's what's going to happen next. And the final one was those 20,000 troops in D.C. supposedly sleeping in the halls of Congress. They're not sleeping. They're going to wake up, and on Trump's command, they're going to stop the inauguration from happening. Of course, that didn't happen, but Q's still not over. I mean, he got on the helicopter, he pardoned a bunch of fraudulent criminals, right? Filled the swamp, flew to Florida, and they're still convincing themselves that, there's more to the story.
Yeah, I heard a lot of twists about, well, at this point, you need to trust the plan more than ever. You need to have faith. I mean, it's feeling more and more like a religion.
I was just going to say, it's just like that preacher who's like, the world's going to end on this date. Oh, this date.
Right.
I mean this date.
Right. And
but the Millerites still exist. So, I mean, like those religions haven't gone away hundreds of years later.
No, they'll just change. And that's the thing. There was you're reading a lot about the frustration and the bewilderment of the Q crowd all seeing the inauguration happening and just like it's not computing for them because they were so certain that something was going to happen or that they were going to let him be inaugurated. And then it was going to be treasonous because it was a disputed election that hasn't been settled. So then we were going to be able to arrest Biden for treason and that's not going to happen either.
The most recent one I got was that before Trump left, he put the military on DEFCON 2, which means even though there's an inauguration, but they explained it, even though there's an inauguration of a new president, he can't become the commander-in-chief on DEFCON 2, which means POTUS number 45 is still commander-in-chief in our military, and he's going to come back and arrest Biden as the commander-in-chief.
Right.
Probably wearing the Punisher gear, too.
Listen, I agree that it's sad. And these people have been riding the roller coaster of his Twitter feed for the last 4 years, and now they don't know what to do with themselves.
I did hear, though, that Q followers were saying, hey, if you think that this isn't part of the plan, then why were there 17 flags on stage at the inauguration?
Clearly.
It's a really important number to them. So they said, listen, how much clearer can we get? How many more signs do you need? And these people will continue to find their signs and their little, and some have even said, hey, Biden is actually on our side now. Biden is going to be the one who's going to exercise the rest of the plan. So you just need to buy that in. And is it really all that unbelievable that these people who are so far down this rabbit hole buying all this nonsense that they can suddenly pivot and think that Biden is the new savior? No, of course not. They'll have a new conspiracy.
But
soon.
He's not culty enough.
Definitely
He doesn't
not.
have the cult of personality.
And they've got some walking back to do about him drinking the blood of children.
Oh, dear. I missed that part.
Because his blood wasn't real blood.
Yeah. That's what they thought.
He only faked the adrenochrome.
I have to say, speaking of Twitter, I actually just started following the POTUS account again after not following it for 4 years. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Let me, and have you seen the new Obama Biden memes that are out again already?
No.
They're back and they're funny, yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's something to look forward to. But while they come and take our civil liberties. But let me talk about, and I'd love to get your guys' input on the disappointments of the Trump presidency. I'm not talking about the standard ones. We can go on for a week and a half. But my son and I were talking about it last night because he was actually, when he saw this guy talking about why he was a Bernie supporter and then why he was a Trump supporter, my son, who was, we went to Halloween as Bernie Sanders. He's left of left, but he said I could really get that. I could really understand that. And he said that was just a great example of somebody whose frustration showed that. And I said, look, for me, Trump was a no-go for me. like from a moral standpoint, just because of the birther thing. So if you were front and center for that, which again, we talked about last episode, that most of these Trump supporters were new voters. And every time I'd have a conversation and bring that up, they'd be like, oh, I wasn't following politics then. That was the part where it was just morally reprehensible. Plus I lived up in New York. I knew about all the stuff of, Central Park 5. There was just so much that disqualified. That said, when looking at the Republican field, I liked that Donald Trump said to Jeb Bush, when he said he kept us safe after 9/11, and he was like, yeah, but he let it happen. That needed to be said, because that was always, he got a pass on that, hey, you were asleep at the wheel, Jack. You know what I mean? You had a report that said Osama bin Laden, determined to attack U.S., might use airplanes, and you didn't come off vacation. And the woman who was in charge of the agency at that point, you promoted them to Secretary of State. They failed upward, Condoleezza Rice. So from what was she, NSA director to Secretary of State, that needed to be said. The conversation about immigration needed to be said in the sense that neither party has ever been interested in solving it. It's one of those issues that they like to fundraise on. They like to, really demonize the other side. All Democrats just want free and open borders. They want to let rapists and criminals in. And then, all Republicans want to kick out, poor people coming from other countries that just want a better life and want to help our economy.
Biden did just do something about it. A couple things.
Well, here's the thing. So reversing those orders, Great first start. But here's the part that I mean is that Congress will never pass comprehensive immigration reform. Both parties, when they had the opportunities, don't, because they throw out these deal breakers right from the start to movable positions. It's just like the abortion issue. The vast majority of them don't want to actually deal with it. They want to just fundraise.
They just want to have a stance on it.
For political reasons.
But to return to your question about the disappointments of the Trump presidency, because there was another thing that he said super early on in one of the debates that made me go, oh no, because I thought it had to be said. One of the very first debates, they asked him, hey, you've given millions to Democrats.
Yes.
You've given millions to Republicans. What's the deal, Jack? Like, how can we trust you? Kind of a gotcha question. And Trump said, I give because it benefits me. And the system is broken. And somebody who can give money can buy politicians.
That clip was in that Robert Reich documentary last night. Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that part made me go, he's got a point there. Mm-hmm. And that is a populist stance right from the get-go to say, hey, I'm no politician. I'm just playing the game, and that's why I will fix the game. And then he got into the office, didn't do a damn thing about that. In fact, it got swampier.
Well, he didn't do anything. That was the problem, is that he didn't like to govern.
This is what he did right here. I'm moving my thumbs like I'm tweeting on my phone.
And Rage tweeted and watched Fox News, and that was the real, the big failure of his presidency was that he didn't want to govern. He had no interest in governing whatsoever.
None.
I don't think he wanted to win.
No, probably not.
I think it was a publicity stunt gone very wrong.
A lot of people thought it was leverage for the apprentice for his salary.
Yeah, and I believe what Cohen said when Cohen finally faced the music and faced questioning, and he said, Trump turned to him one time and said, watch, this will be the world's greatest infomercial. I believe that he actually said that. I think that he came out and said, I mean, if you'll remember, he was still hawking products early on.
Oh my God, yes.
He had products laid out in front of him at press conferences. He had no interest in being president. He wanted to sell magazines.
Another shame of it is, the truth is, had he governed in a very populist manner and used his charismatic effect, especially on that far right, to sell populist policies that, look, if he would have said, listen, Medicare for all is good for business. We're going to take this off the books of businesses. I own businesses. I didn't want, how many guys out there, does that hurt you hiring in a small business? Like, he could have sold that easily.
The thing is, even though he did barely anything for them, they still worship him, and he's got an email list that he can market to people,
But
for
what
the rest
he
of his
really
life.
wanted was to be loved and adored.
Right.
And he didn't get, he got it, but he got it by
he got it by pandering to the worst people. I mean, he wanted to be, that's why he kept rallies going. He wanted to be a rock star with the immunities of being president. He didn't have any interest in governing. I mean, that's why you look at...
And he got to be a bully. He got to be a tough guy. Like he had a bunch of henchmen behind him. Yeah. He got to talk tough language that he never got to talk before when he was a civilian. And all of a sudden he was talking, because I'm the commander-in-chief, I've got Secret Service all around me. And that was really just gross. But I even said at one point, look, maybe Trump will be the first president to do something as simple as get rid of daylight savings.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know we don't need it. It's incredibly unpopular. It gives us nothing anymore. And there's all this evidence that it actually, more people die of heart attacks, strokes within the first couple of weeks. All these awful things happen. Yeah. And it could easily be done with an executive order gone.
He'd have won Florida by 10 points.
Yes!
He could have easily gone. Listen, how popular would a real infrastructure plan been?
Right.
Hey, I'm the greatest builder in New York. I'll build stuff and
nobody knows more about building things than me.
Job creation,
Yeah.
That would have been great. Very timely.
That could have been, I guess that's one of my biggest disappointments. He didn't lift a finger on infrastructure outside of this stupid wall, which didn't do anything and didn't create any jobs.
And I think a good deal of it fell over.
In the wind.
Yes, in the wind.
Well, and that's another unfortunate part where it's like, it only takes one adult in the room to say, hey guys, listen, most illegal undocumented immigrants don't actually come through this way. They fly into an airport on a travel visa,
and
they overstay it, and they get a job somewhere.
But that's not that doesn't fit with the image to, manipulate people.
Right, of caravans storming in.
Right, exactly. And those people probably aren't, a lot of those people are not brown. Mm-hmm. And so we need to teach you to dislike the brown people. So it just doesn't fit the narrative.
Yeah, because the wall was always to only go on one side of the country.
Right.
Ocean wall, Canadians, we're fine.
But the Canadians were probably like, we're good.
Actually, I heard they were like, actually, we want a wall now.
Well, we're good. Listen though, in actuality, what we've seen is more people cross the Canadian border from the no-fly list though than attempted from the Mexican side. So it actually was a more common route because, let's face it, it's easier logistically to go from most places in the world into Canada and then move around and move resources and everything than it is in Mexico, and it's also an English speaking language, English speaking country, so you don't have to add another language that the person would speak on top of it. So there was a great deal of evidence that there was actually more attempted crossings by nefarious people over the
through Canada.
Not Canadians. We love you guys.
But that wall was the most populous thing he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but it was a divisive populace. So I'm talking
that's
about.
What I mean.
I think he could have took these 60 and 70% issues and that's really what what Bernie would do. That's what a real populist would do. There's two kinds of populism, I guess. That dark populism John McCain talked about, that you can tap into the hatreds on one side or the other and say, we won now. Elections have consequence. We're going to put our boot in your neck and you're going to like it.
Exactly what happened.
That's what they did. The other part is to say, hey, what about that 70 or 80% of the people that want all these things, that it's just a little bit of the donor class and corporate interests that don't want them? What if we had somebody who wanted to give us all that?
But that's the whole, election finance problem.
Right. And even someone who is such a billionaire like Trump is, like a very legitimate billionaire.
Very legitimate.
And definitely not in debt. But let's say he was, he could have been, put the racism aside, he could have been someone who thumbed his nose at the donor class. Finally. I think enough people bought that early on, especially people who don't pay much attention to super PACs. They said, he's not a politician. He's independently wealthy. Nobody owns him. He's his own guy. And then, he catered to the donor class as much as possible as president, including the NRA.
And his supporters think he worked for free. And, it just...
Because he donated those checks, man. He donated that $400,000
to the Trump organization.
Yeah,
probably. But I mean, how could you, as like a coal miner in West Virginia, think that this billionaire, this so-called billionaire, represents you? Like, where does your mind? How does that happen in your mind?
Well, to paraphrase the gentleman from the documentary last night, it was that, God, I hate this idiom, but government needs to be run like a business. We need a businessman in there. And it's not a guy who's ever run a business that's saying it. It's an employee, a laborer saying it.
And in saying that, have you ever researched the history of Donald Trump's business dealings?
Right.
Yeah, they're all bad.
Because he is a businessman, but not a very good one, or not a very scrupulous one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a lot of mythology around it. You know, they bought the whole thing of a small loan from my dad. It was hundreds of millions of dollars, diverted to cheat taxes. And he lost an astounding amount of money. I mean, there's evidence, what was it, over those not complete tax returns, but over those different forms that New York Times were able to assemble, over a 10-year period, there was not a single American who claimed to have lost more money than Donald Trump over 10 years. Mm-hmm. That's not like, hey, I have good years and bad years. That's a decade of just losing money.
But that is a tax strategy to lose money, So
no, this was legit money loss, though. Like it was just like, I'm pouring it out, nothing's coming in. I'm just
strategy came after he lost. He was like, listen, we got to write this off. Right, and I can't pay taxes.
And
for
yes, there are excellent ways, particularly for developers. Developers have it, and he helped that in the newest tax code. They have it even better. But
Obama helped him too, by the way.
Yes, no question.
Yeah,
no question.
Before Trump was even in office, Trump was taking advantage of some things that, thanks to the recovery that we were coming back from the recession, that it allowed you to deduct taxes for years into the future based on 1 year of losses. So all Trump had to do was have one really sensationally bad year, and then he didn't pay taxes.
That's what he did with the Taj Mahal. Was stretched over a long period of time because he lost so much money. But then the Taj Mahal also shows you what a bad business person he was. First of all, he bankrupted a casino.
Yes, that's been pointed out. Like
Literally, the house wins.
Right, exactly. A business that is,
But he was, and people that worked on him said he was too dumb. It was like Bugsy Siegel. If you watch that movie, they were explaining you can't have that many rooms and this much gaming floor. Yeah. You can't have this much, outside attraction and this much gaming floor. Yep. The money is made in the gaming floor. The more stuff you keep adding, you're taking away from the thing that makes the money and taking for things that eat the money. So don't you get that?
It was almost like he ran the presidency like he ran his businesses.
Yes.
It was the parts that made him feel good.
Right.
He just did what made him feel good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All id.
Yeah.
He was America's id for 4 years, the worst of us. And I said during the presidency several times, you don't always get the president you want, but you get the president you deserve.
Yeah.
And we probably deserved Donald Trump at that point.
Some of us did.
Well, I'm not saying we all did, but
no.
If you don't pay attention as a full society and participate in democracy by more than just, hey, would I like to have a beer with this guy?
Maybe a little more money for civics classes.
Right. Mm-hmm. One other interesting thing in that documentary that really crystallized what we talked about earlier, the campaign finance part, is Rice showed the amount of corporate obviously the CEO graphic, but then also the amount of corporate percentage of corporate profits that went toward political donations, and how after the tax changes throughout the Reagan administration, and then he completely owned everything that happened in the Clinton administration, and then through afterward, the exponential nature of the way the share of the GDP that went to corporate profits and went away from labor moved on the exact same line as the share of funding that went into political groups and political finance moved toward coming from corporate interests. And my son pointed out, he goes, oh my God, that's an exponential curve. You can't stop it now. Like you now are at a point where CEOs, he goes, they'll make 5,000 times at some point. Like it just keeps going.
Reich is like a Bernie Sanders fanboy, right?
Yes.
So I listen to him a lot. I really like, how he frames things. So yeah, that's a big problem.
If we could get Reich and Stephanie Kelton on a team with Biden and turn things around, but that will not happen. No. We've already got the deficit hawks back in who are going to be telling us, like Obama did, America's broke. We don't have the money for that.
Yeah.
We don't have the funding.
Well, Bernie is the head of what committee now?
The budget.
The budget committee.
And that's going to be very, very interesting. And it'll be interesting to see if he brings Kelton back in.
What sort of power does that actually give him?
Not a whole lot in terms of driving policy individually.
But maybe what to bring to the table?
Yes, it will allow him to fly the flags and bring things into conversation. So that's where he could be a real pain in the ass for Democrats.
He drives the narrative now.
Yes, yes.
That sounds great.
It does. All right, let's move on to a subject that I this is a little bit self-indulgent because I like this subject, but all right, there's been some weird things happening in 2020, obviously. But one thing that really, really kind of like piqued my interest during the whole quarantine part was this slow drip that the government started putting out about what it knows about UFOs. All right. And there is some fascinating information that's been released. I'm always one of those people that I always say I'm a pragmatist. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I won't tell you, oh, here's what happened. Here's what, but I will tell you when things don't add up. And there's always been, a tremendous amount of very, very interesting evidence when it comes to UFOs. Some of the most interesting ones that I found were the Bob Lazar story. Of course, he's the one that worked at Los Alamos, the part considered Area 51. And he talked about Element 115. And that was, years and years before scientists from Russia and America were able to partially stabilize Element 115 before anybody knew it existed. He said that it was found from an alien craft. Bob Lazar's, story, totally fascinating in itself. Then of course you have the Travis Walton abduction. There was a book and then movie Fire in the Sky, where you had, 7 people there that all passed lie detector tests with flying colors, who all had the exact same story about, supposed abduction, to the more interesting sighting stuff like the Commander Faber, the U.S. Navy footage that's since been released of the Tic Tac craft that moved with, previously unknown sort of propulsion.
Yeah, but you're not into any of this stuff. I can tell.
No, I disclose I'm very into it. But what I found very exciting was the way the government was doing this soul leak. And at first I was like, is this a distraction technique? Is it like, all right, we are really worried about people staying in our houses and going stir crazy. We know alcohol sales are up 300%. One full moon away, we might be from total chaos and disorder. Let's just give them some alien shit.
Do you think the QAnon people needed alien stuff?
Well, they already had their stuff. So it was like, what about this? The people who are just like drinking and getting angry. Let's give them something. Let's give the other side. But, this little slow drip up to and including then a bunch of people in Congress saying, hey, wait a minute, why don't we know anything about this? And in the most recent COVID relief bill in December, there was now a lot of people said it was a law. It was not. It's a request of the Pentagon to, within 180 days, brief Congress, not necessarily make it public, brief Congress on everything known about extraterrestrial life. Now, one of the things
No. It's not about extraterrestrial life. It's about these unidentified, they call them unidentified aerial phenomena.
Yes, well,
UAPs.
So they don't know, because Marco Rubio is the one who made the request. And
Florida zone. It's got to be Florida man. Florida man requests info on UFOs.
His concern is that they might be connected to some technological leap from U.S. adversaries like China or Russia.
That's been a long...
So they're not saying like these are aliens from outer space necessarily.
Listen, one thing we have to acknowledge. There was this Harvard. I was watching a podcast the other day, and there was this Harvard physicist that was the first guy who got like basically almost like canceled in his field because he had said when that so-called comet a few years back that was detected by a giant observatory in Hawaii. I don't want to mess the name up, but it's some Hawaiian name of that place, what they named this comet. He was the first person to say that doesn't conform with what we've ever observed with a comet. Now, it went and it got sensationalized in the New York Post that he was saying it was an extraterrestrial ship, which he clarified I was not. He didn't think it was functional, but he said the piece moved as though it was, to use his things, inorganic. And he said, what that means, I don't know. But he said, I don't think it was rock and I don't think it was a comet. But the one thing he pointed out that I think is very important to talk about is that he said, there's this really, really weird way in which the academic fields, including physics, will not allow you to talk about that. It's a really quick way to get kicked out of the club because you're supposed to say, well, that's, crazy little green man shit that we don't talk about at academic universities. And he's like, I'm just a scientist. And I'm just saying, well, why are you just saying it's a comet? Like, aren't you interested in the fact that it's not behaving like any other comet that we've ever seen before? It doesn't have a tail. It's not, the ice isn't melting down to propel it backward. It came from outside of our sun's gravitational pull, which meant it came from a different star. So it was propelled by something. He thought it was propelled possibly by the light because it was continuously turning and it was giving off light. He didn't think it was itself giving off light. It was reflecting light, and that can cause propulsion. So he said, listen, again, I'm not saying it's a spaceship. I'm just saying this is really interesting, and we should be looking really close at this. And all my colleagues were like, we're not comfortable with that. Yeah, no, comet, right? Yeah, oh, yeah, we all agree, comet. Yeah, you're crazy. Get out of here. And, so this bias against talking about it or looking at it, he's like, why wouldn't we not want to know that?
That is a good element of this being sort of tacked onto the coronavirus as this request and commentary to be talked about within 180 days. We'll see if Biden follows up on it and he wants this to come out, but it seems like there's bipartisan support and that we should just have a conversation about it. I'm not into UFOs. I don't know these stories at all. I'd never even heard the acronym UAP before. That's probably why I didn't know about any of these. But after I read about
this SUPs, I use them all the time. Look at that.
What is that? Yeah, this is Florida, man. After I read this story, my first thought in my head was, oh shit, maybe we do need a Space Force.
By the way, has anyone watched that show on
No,
Netflix?
I haven't. Is it good?
It's hilarious. It's got
Steve Carell.
Yeah, Steve Carell.
Yeah.
I don't want to Loch Ness monster this, but every image or video I've seen claiming to be a UFO is very far away and grainy. So yes, we should look into these, but it's a little to me like the Loch Ness monster. Like someone sees it out of the corner of their eye, and there's no
that you've seen
images.
That's the point.
Like,
maybe we have things that you haven't seen
yet. If these are
yet.
extraterrestrials, why don't they just come all the way down to the ground? Why are they always just out of our eyesight? I'm just saying.
Okay, again, and this is all a speculative part. So, you'll have people that will tell you, and that's a conspiracy theorist. I don't know, but if you looked at a couple things, one, I wouldn't suggest that the government tell us, to be very honest with you. In a world where Qanon can exist, we're clearly not ready for that.
No.
You know what I mean?
No, we can't handle the truth that we have.
There's a couple crazy members of Congress right now. Do you really think this should get out to them?
Yeah, right. We have two QAnon members. Yeah. No, listen, Harry Reid was really big on it. Harry Reid actually pushed for a lot of funding for it, and Harry Reid really pushed to try to get things done about it and could not. Clinton said that he asked while he was in there and couldn't get anything about it. He mentioned that in an interview one time. So, there are some, there's some evidence that it's not really one of those things that you come into Congress or even come into the White House and about. Trump was asked about it once, and he was kind of vague, and you could very much tell it was a guy with a massive ego saying, "Yeah, they wouldn't tell me either." That's some interesting things.
He's like, "Well, I can't tell you."
I saw something, and they threatened to kill me.
Right now, he'll probably tell when he gets out. It'll be like his dinner party thing.
I think that if anyone,
I can't say it.
If anyone brings this to Biden in the next 3 months, I think they're going to get fired. I think he's going to say, "We have so much." I'm
not.
To do.
Listen, I'm not suggesting in any way that we do more of this. What I'm inquisitive about is if for some reason you were a government and you either understood that you believed keeping it secret wasn't going to be possible, or for some reason you were going to disclose something else that in order to pacify people and make them not go crazy, you were going to have to explain it. The way to sort of get people prepared for it would seem to be this slow drip of, the one thing...
We'll talk about it in 6 months.
The one thing that came out from the Defense Department was yes, we have found materials that we believe are not of this world. That was the statement they made. So yes, we have found materials. We're assuming crash sites. We don't know if that was the case.
Well, or couldn't that be in a meteor that crashed on the Earth,
sure.
Or like a comet? It doesn't mean it was like a spaceship.
Sure, but again, the idea. Well, the element 115, which we've now seen, they've actually synthesized in labs after you had this guy that, and the Bob Lazar story is interesting because he was erased. He was erased from employment with the defense contractor he worked for. He was erased from his time at MIT. None of his records are available. And they all said immediately, nope, never worked here, never went here, until they found dozens of people who went on the record. Again, this is all pre-internet, so it was a lot easier to discredit people and just kind of quiet things. They went and found dozens of people that were like, no, I was at MIT in a class with him. No, I worked there with Bob Lazar. No, he absolutely worked there for years and years and years. Or I was his neighbor, and yeah, he always came from Los Alamos, and it was never a guy who was ever seeking attention. In fact, quite the opposite. He's been very leery of the attention that it's given him. But I don't know. Like, I try not to be. Again, I have no dog in the fight here. I've always found it fascinating.
Well, I think a lot of people like the idea that there's something else out there, maybe something smarter than we are.
Well, if you look at this is another angle of it when you say, well, how would they be able to do this or do that? And to your question earlier, the gentleman I talked about, Thomas Walton, the Fire in the Sky abduction, is he said, I don't believe that they came and looked for me. He goes, and I don't think they really want anything more than to observe me. And he said that I look at it like if you were looking at an anthill, which is what people of this sophistication would be looking at, you wouldn't want to say, well, I want to have a conversation with that ant over there. It would just be like, okay, what's this thing?
Well, sure.
So I don't think there's and again, if you're that highly intelligent, you would probably be aware that, yeah, they're probably not going to be able to understand this and might, be implications to just revealing yourself. So it might just be an observational thing. And again, if we were looking at, let's say, indigenous animals on some, deserted island, we wouldn't have this like, let's see if we can communicate with them. We would just kind of have this study and observe. But
well, and like if there are beings in outer space, they might not even communicate the same way we do.
Yes,
obviously,
it might be completely impossible.
Right.
So
you're going to have to keep an eye on this for us. You're going to have to
absolutely keep an eye on
I want
this.
to know if they're coming down to take over.
They might sneak like a UFO spending bill into like an
if they wanted to
spending
take
or something.
over with that kind of technology, I think they could have done that a long time ago.
Yeah.
But here's an interesting part of it, though. If you look at, when you think about technology and you think about all the things, we think of it in like, well, how would that happen because we can't do things? And my son and I had an interesting conversation the other day about technology when I was explaining to him, and this is something that kind of freaks me out a little bit. When you look at, we're all, I think Elsie and I are about the same age. Brendan's a little bit younger. And when you look at the technology that happened in the last 40 years, right? The first 20 of that, it's really kind of marginal, incremental, almost generational change.
Right, now it's exponential.
Like 8 trucks.
Yes,
Tape,
every generation. I always use that example.
Cassette
Every
tapes,
generation had a different way to listen to
CDs,
music.
mini CDs.
But now
MP3s.
you'll go to college for computer science and have irrelevant information by the time you graduate.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely. I
Yes.
believe that.
So if you extrapolate that and say, well, from 2000 to 2010 was a rapid, if you remember, this is one of the examples I use in terms of framing technology that I read one time that stuck with me, was that when the towers fell on September 11, 2001, there was not yet a thing called an iPod.
Wow.
The iPod hadn't come out yet, let alone the iPhone.
I had a pager on that day. I remember getting paged.
I had a pager back then as well.
Yeah.
I think I had a cell phone, but not a very sophisticated one.
I didn't even have a cell phone then.
And
So 2000 and 2010, by 2010, YouTube's in its infancy, kind of. It doesn't have its anywhere near its culture impact. Now it's got 15% of all internet traffic at any time is YouTube. So, I mean, when you look at what we've been able to do with how much exponentially we've been able to compress digital data, and that we've been able to speed up the transmittance of it, and then you extrapolate that out, and then look at things like we mapped the human genome. And then look at the different things that has caused. We're now, when you look at like what Elon Musk is doing with this neural net thing, where they're doing brain implants to have computer interfaces in a brain. We had artificial limbs, but now they're talking about brain things. So when you try to extrapolate it out for the next 20 and then the next 60, who knows where we'll be in 100 years.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that. I think we might go backwards at some point, but
We'll all unplug instead of going exponentially up. We'll say enough. Back to the plains and the forests.
or we'll either ruin our planet or blow ourselves to smithereens for a while. Who knows?
Yeah.
But to bring this conversation back, I saw this great meme online And it was basically aliens were invading the United States like last year or whatever. And they said, take us to your leader. And they're like, you should wait.
Very, very good. All right, let's wrap up with, let me ask you guys, if you had the ability to snap your fingers and get one major policy initiative done out of the Biden administration in the first, let's even just say the first term, one major thing gets actually accomplished in the first term, Elsie, what would it be for you?
So I was looking at this list of things that Bernie Sanders had on his list of what he would do right away if he became president. And one of them that I'm pretty sure they said could be done with executive order is to expand Medicare to every citizen of the United States. And right now we're kind of in a medical emergency situation.
So you would do like a public option where you would have the option to
No, because
buy...
Medicare already exists.
Okay.
So
well,
you
what I'm
could
saying
just
is you'd
expand
enroll, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would make it so everybody was enrolled or could be
So
enrolled.
would they pay anything extra? It would just be their Medicare FICA taxes now. So we...
Right. I mean, we already, I don't know, we might have to raise that a tiny bit, but
Okay.
we already pay for Medicare. So,
Right, but we would
but
be
not for
expanding
everybody.
it. Right.
Right. Yeah. So it would be an incremental, tax thing, but because everyone would be covered, that makes insurance cheaper. So.
Okay.
That's what I
Brendan?
would do.
I'm going to go with the chaos theory and say campaign finance reform because I
Ooh.
think that's the root of all evil.
Yeah.
And it would cause the most immediate large scale change in the way that we talked about policy and the way that we elect our officials and the way that laws are framed, because they would become simpler if you didn't have to worry about pleasing donors at every turn. And the donors that you would please would be the Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders donors.
How would you do it?
How would I do it?
Yeah.
He said magic wand. I just would say
Oh, okay.
snap my fingers and make it a magic wand.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you
why?
can cure Citizens United with legislation.
Well, right.
Yes. And so comprehensive. I mean, this is not one law.
Well, I
if you're
was
saying
gonna
if I get the
say-
wand, I would say, let's take money out of politics and see what happens. That's why it's chaotic, I think, because it would be a radical shift across the board.
All right. I'm going to go with, I would like to see both parties finally admit that this deficit hawk way of looking at economics, that everything's paid for and borrowed debt, and not acknowledging that the federal government as a currency issuer is completely different than a state or local government operating off the actual taxes they take in, and instead be honest with people and say the reason why we can go to war whenever we want, we can bail out big giant companies whenever we want, we can spend trillions of dollars on a pandemic whenever we want, is because there's no limit other than inflation to the amount of money that we can spend. We have not been hitting our even inflationary targets, and the money is there for things like infrastructure, for things like healthcare in the exact same way. And if we have to tax it out of it, not who's going to pay for it, if we then have to tax extra money out of the economy to keep from inflation, then yes, we're going to do it at the top, because that's where all that power consolidates that then is used to fund the perpetuation of the status quo. So if any one of those three things get done, though, I'll take it with a big smile.
The world would
Me
be very
too.
different. So you would say that the difference would be in messaging. It's not really a policy standpoint. It's
Well, it
more
would be
of a-
policy, because one thing that I would get rid of is like PAYGO and different federal laws
Sure.
that were put in place to support the fallacy that your taxes get collected and then we spend it, instead of the reality, which is Congress authorizes spending, we print the money, and then we tax money afterward out of the economy to prevent inflation, and we issue debt so that we could support interest rates in the banks, so that the reserves don't add up too much. So that, in that sense, fixing that system and then acknowledging the messaging, and then not really spending more per se, but just not only doing the break glass in case of emergency for war and
Yeah.
corporate bailout, doing it instead and saying, oh, hey, listen, the same thing we did when we were sending $13 billion a month out the door for Iraq and Afghanistan, the same thing we did for the millions of dollars that we sent to corporations that just, most of them just stole it from during the
I was going to say,
COVID
it's not
relief.
just the messaging, it doesn't work either.
Right. Yeah. Well, it does work. It works exactly the way it's intended to work.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't
It
work for the
way they-
American people.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, take it and do it in the same exact way for worthwhile projects. The reason why we don't do that, in my belief, is because it's fear that the social hierarchy isn't going to be supported. And the truth is, and that's the problem with that exponential growth, and why Brendan's wish is so important, is that when you gather more capital, you tend to spend just a little bit of it on maintaining the status quo and expanding, your leverage in the system. And then that allows you to perpetually, grow more and more power while the people beneath you become a larger and more disenfranchised class. And as long as they believe this lie you're telling them that, hey, the American economy is the greatest in the world, but if we paid people just a minimum wage that was in line with inflation,
it'll collapse.
It'll collapse.
Yeah. And Big Macs will be $37.
Yes.
Trickle down economics.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd take any of those three as well.
All right, so I'm going to leave you with one more piece of financial advice. When this fight for 15 comes up and people talk about this nonsense that $15 will collapse the economy, the reality is that if you pay these people more, that is going to drive up the price of wages up through that $16 an hour job now becomes $22 if you want the person that's above minimum wage in terms of their skill sets. That $22 becomes a $28. The middle class, it pumps up all the way into the stock portfolios, because the other part is the lower you pump money into the economy, the more of it gets spent into the economy, which then drives corporate profits and their portfolios look better.
That's why all of our billionaires made a gajillion dollars
during COVID.
But here's the problem is that, the messaging is you're going to pay $20 for your hamburger, and you will pay $20 for your hamburger if the CEO of that company doesn't want to make less profit. So it's
if you're going to rail against $15 an hour, you have to also rail against offshore bank accounts.
Unless
you have to
more,
say these people are taking money away from the economy and it's not helping anyone and they're stashing it away. You have to say the same. You can't just say, well, things will get more expensive. There's a reason why things get expensive.
Exactly.
And that's
what I'm saying is they don't have to get more expensive.
Right.
That's a choice that the company will make.
But you don't even have to make a choice in terms of profits, because you'll sell more hamburgers. So you'll have more.
People will have more money for hamburgers.
Spending into the economy.
And I've said this for years, watching what's going on in our economy for the common man, which I consider myself one of. It's like, why are you impoverishing all your customers? I don't understand. Do you understand the repercussions of what you're doing? Like these are the people who buy things.
But it's one of those things where, one, you'll get punished in the marketplace. And that's why government regulation, the carrot and the stick of the tax code, is so important, because you incentivize good behavior and you tax bad behavior. Look what we did with cigarettes. I mean, that's the best example.
Right. Well, we don't always do that. Sometimes we incentivize bad behavior, like oil subsidies.
Yes, absolutely.
No.
But no, if you say to someone, if I act on my own, for example, let's say Target goes out and says, I'm going to pay all my employees $7 an hour more. Now, unless everybody, and this is the unfortunate truth is, the American people are not going to move in mass and say, I'll pay more at Target to support what they're doing. They might buy once in a while there, but they're still going to go on to Amazon and get something cheaper. Okay. That's what I call the Walmarting of America, is that you have a lot of poor people that don't have a lot of discretionary income. So they're taking the cheaper price. So if you do good on your own, the marketplace will actually punish you in most instances. So sometimes you have to say, hey, listen, for the good of everybody, we're not going to just rely on somebody undercuts you. And we're going to say everybody has to go at least here. So if we use the tax code in a way, or policy that way, in a way to force everybody forward, it'll all work. But the problem then comes back to when you say, why would the Democrats not want to do this? Is it because these people don't understand it? Well, down on the bottom, the small business owners don't understand it. They don't have a lot of education on economics. And if you run a little small business and you're thinking, my payroll just jumps up, you're not thinking, oh, well, my receipts will go up, the same. But the at least at the top, no. But again, that's why I really believe that the real elephant in the room is the social structure, is the people like Jeff Bezos are saying, hey, it's really good to be Jeff Bezos today. And I'm not sure I want my, warehouse workers to make $65,000 a year, because then they might become more, socially engaged people. And if they're not desperate under my thumb, they might look at the whole system and say, it's
tear it down.
Oh, you mean the serf class?
Yes.
The serf class, so that's Bernie Sanders said there shouldn't be billionaires. Our economy should not be set up in a way that people become billionaires, because that's not healthy for our economy.
Well, it sounds like you just want to punish people for success, Elsie.
Yes, I do.
Communist. On that note, that will do it for this episode of Punk Rock Politics. You can find more on punkrockpolitics.com. For Elsie Gilmore and Brendan Ragan, I am Mitch Maley, and we are out. Thank you, guys.